Hey there, listener. Welcome to the Deep Share Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Rouse, and for the last couple of decades, I've slowly been opening my eyes to a very different world than the one I grew up hearing about. And the more conversations I have with interesting people, the more mystifying this world becomes. So without further ado, let's get deep.
We've got science to celebrate! Demons bliss out! After what, baby? Come on!
There is rebellion in the wind. It will crush.
Everything I've said is true, it's real.
Dinosaur fossils? God put those here to test our faith.
A damn lie, I saw them with my own eye!
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
We did illusions, man! None of it is true!
I'm not insane!
This is mass madness, you maniacs! In God's name, you people are the real thing! We are the illusion!
Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Share Podcast. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. It's something that's a hot button in my home, in our community, and now becoming a global situation, of course. Tonight I have on John Klyczek, and he is a professor who has taught rhetoric, and he's also the author of School World Order, which is actually originally how I found him a while back and hadn't had a chance to ask him on. And then I found this article from Unlimited Hangout that he had just written all about this crazy woman and the reign of terror in the spiritual community that she has had in a very clandestine way. So we're going to get into that and possibly his book, and we'll see where it takes us. So everybody, please welcome John Klyczek. How's it going, man?
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's doing all right.
Glad to have you on, man. I really appreciate it. I know this article just came out, the other day or last week? How recent is this?
I want to say last Wednesday.
Last Wednesday, okay.
Yeah.
I caught up with it just the day that I emailed you, man, because this whole topic is very personal because, I'm a psychedelic guy. That's where my background is, into the world of the weird and questioning things. It starts at psychedelics, where a lot of the concepts that this technocratic spiritual thing that's happening in our culture, a lot of that speaks to a lot of like the deep inner truth that I have found in myself, heard about talking around campfires with friends, deep research into ancient history. So while there is a lot of validity to the concepts at their roots in a lot of what these people say in general, I know that, of course, there's a hidden agenda here, and it's probably one of the most powerful ones. And who knows, it probably connects back to the first time psychedelics were raging loose in the culture in the 60s and being handed out possibly by CIA clandestine agents in the rock and roll community. Who knows? It's been going on for a while, obviously, and it's all coming together, it seems now. And John, I won't ramble on anymore. First, let's get a little bit of background for my audience into who you are and where you are in this game we're playing with these elites.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, I teach college rhetoric. I'm an adjunct at a couple of different community colleges. I'm married. I got a rat terrier. Author of School World Order, which was based on a lot of Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt's research. She worked for the Department of Education under Ronald Reagan, blew the whistle on something called Project BEST, which is basic education skills through technology. And so it was this technology initiative to basically change academics to workforce training through public-private partnerships that would implement Skinnerian teaching machines that would use operant conditioning to psychologically condition your kids rather than teach them grammar, logic, and rhetoric in the classical method. And so that's sort of how I kind of dipped my feet into, I guess, the world of so-called conspiracy theories. I should also mention that, Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt, her family was, her father and her grandfather were the Order of Skull and Bones, And so my book also actually looks at how the Order of Skull and Bones was instrumental in not just setting up the stimulus response or classical psychological conditioning methods in the education system, but basically they were instrumental in setting up compulsory education, and they were also had their hands in setting up the whole ed tech agenda. And, actually, Charlotte just passed away back in February this year. I actually, I went and visited her about 6-7 times in the last couple of years. She gave me all of her research, gave me all of her files, all of her books, including the Skull and Bones address books that she leaked to Anthony Sutton, who wrote this book here, America's Secret Establishment, The Order of Skull and Bones, sort of the seminal work on the order. So that's sort of my background as far as how I dipped my feet into this. The book does sort of look at, obviously, through investigating the Order of Skull and Bones, sort of the occult dimensions in the ed technocracy. So in some ways, this article I just recently wrote is a little outside my general wheelhouse, but it does dovetail in some ways with my research that I focused on prior.
Yeah, I would say if it dovetails it all into the secret societies and things like that, it's literally what we're talking about almost. I feel like this technocratic spiritual convergence that we're going to get into tonight is kind of like an exoteric version of what has been esoteric for so long. It's almost like they're coming out with all of it and it's everywhere and you can't even look away, and they're promoting it and everyone around us is going, yeah, it sounds cool. I like robots. And it's like, oh God, this is not good. So there's the main reason I wanted to have you on was to find out about this woman that you centered this article around, this godmother of the transhumanist movement, who I guess I've been living in a closet or under a rock somewhere because, man, I have never heard of Barbara Marx Hubbard before, unless I've heard of some of her work without knowing her name in passing or something. But man, I've been in this game for like 20 years looking into different gurus and spiritual snake oil peddlers and things like that. And man, her name has slipped by me this whole time. And it's just interesting that she's who she is and has her fingers where she was. And it's just amazing that I've never heard of her. So let's get into this. Like, who is this woman and how has she impacted us without us even knowing?
So a little background on her that's actually not in the article. I did find it to be germane, but just to sort of give you sort of like a biography. So she is the heir to the Marx Toys fortune. So Louis Marx was one of the biggest toy manufacturers, back in the early 20th century. And so, was basically independently wealthy. Her sister actually married Daniel Ellsberg. So her sister is now Patricia Ellsberg, or was. I don't know if she's still alive. Barbara Marx Hubbard passed away in, I think, 2019.
Convenient. Very convenient for her.
yeah. Well, one of the things I mentioned in the article was, she was using this new normal phrase at least as early as 2008. Okay, yeah. And it might have been earlier. So I just maybe coincidence or whatever, but it was right before, I guess, her idea of a new normal sort of became the slogan. Wow. But some other stuff that was notable about her was that she met through her father. Her father was friends with Dwight D. Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, and she met Eisenhower when she was relatively younger. And she tells this story repeatedly on all the different speeches she's given. You can find a lot of them on YouTube. And I guess she went and talked to Eisenhower and asked him something like, we had just developed the nuclear bomb and a lot of other technology. And she's like, what is good about what we're developing technologically? And I guess Eisenhower says something like, well, I don't know. And then she's like, well, I had to find out, and then that sort of set her on this cosmic journey to, sort of find a way to get technology to move along with something she called conscious evolution. So sort of merging technological evolution with some cosmic or spiritual evolution. And at one point, she also was a candidate for the vice president of the United States of America. It was in 1984. And so she was going to be, you can find this speech on YouTube, and she was going to be Walter Mondale's VP, and conceded to whoever it was that ended up running with Mondale instead. His name escapes me. Just an interesting sort of side note that I discovered actually last night is that at some point we'll probably talk about the human potential movement and how it tied into or stemmed from the humanistic psychology of Abraham Maslow. Well, he had this thing called the Eutychian network that Hubbard was a part of. And in that network was something, I think it was the Association for Religious Humanism or the Association for Humanism. I'll have to check my notes, but it's in this book here, which is Maslow's, right, his psychology of being. But one of the founders of that is Mondale's brother. So it's just interesting that, she was running in these circles sort of.
They always do, man.
Yeah.
They always do. That's so bizarre that she was also into politics. It makes perfect sense for obviously what she was doing for so long, being a charlatan. But I mean, I wonder, so could she have also been a puppet? So, I mean, I got into it a little bit with you before we recorded, and as my listeners probably understand by now, that it's like, I kind of walk a fine line between these two worlds, where it's like a lot of the information coming out of this movement is, to me, it's genuine, but it's more that it's hijacked. And that always seems to be the case. It doesn't matter what culture you look at. This force that comes at us all the time, it never seems to create its own thing. It always just hijacks what's true. So it seems really attractive naturally to us. And it's easier to be lured into their perception of it because, a lot of the ideas behind, what we're finding about frequencies and things like that. I don't know, maybe I'm just being duped, but I find a lot of that to be relevant, but not with all this shit that they're attaching onto their agenda and where it's going. What do you think about that?
Well, I got a lot of guff for this article from a lot of people that had a lot.
They're supposed to be being spiritual and being super, super positive all the time.
Well, yeah, all that positive thinking stuff. I mean, I won't say that anybody called me any names or pejoratives. I mean, but the tone wasn't exactly like, the critiques were not specific. It was, very just sort of, I didn't get any ad hominems, but there were sort of these generalizations like, this is, fear mongering, which, and then I usually ask something to the effect of like, can you point out the part that you're referring to? And most of the time people just, they don't actually do that. Some people did. And actually, I spent all day responding to somebody today as far as this was related to the HeartMath Institute that we'll talk about later. And
yes.
So in response to that, I, made me dig deeper and, actually further confirmed what I had surmised or what I had implicated with the rest of the research. But so that's your question as far as like, was she, I guess a puppet or something like that, or did she have good intentions? I mean, I somebody literally asked me, like, did you know her? I knew her, and it's like, well, no, I didn't know her, so no, I can't get in her head. I mean, I'm just looking at,
that's a little much, yeah.
The agenda, I'm looking at, in her own words, quotes of what she's pushing. So, at some point, whether or not you're a puppet, right? You sort of you have to take some responsibility for your puppetry at some point, right?
Absolutely. Hell yeah, man. Definitely. No, I totally agree. I wanted to kind of set that stage because there exists that gray area. And I think it's a result of us, as always, looking to heroes rather than the information that they're saying, because the information can be neutral. It can be used in whichever way they want. I always make the Star Wars comparison with the Force, right? There's two sides to this amazing thing that exists. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And part of the reason why I don't just make an assertive statement about, the woman was evil. I mean, in the next installment, I'm going to document some of these quotes, these Malthusian eugenic quotes about basically culling large amounts of the population to make way for the future of conscious evolution. I mean, stuff like that is pretty psychotic. I mean,
yes, it absolutely is.
I'd have to say that's pretty evil, right? But part of the reason why I don't just, why I sort of try to at least, give some kind of benefit of the doubt, or rather at least entertain the thoughts of people who, are coming to her defense, is one that, as you noted, that in this whole world of, exposing the truth, there's a lot of unnecessary fighting amongst different sides, and so I don't care to stir any of that up, and it's sort of I don't care to be I don't like my rhetoric to be overly emotional and things like that. You know what I mean? So, but at the end of the day, I stand by what I wrote, and I would say that again, if she was puppeteered, at a certain level, she was complicit in the puppeteering, which at the end of the day, I'd have to say, probably not a good person, maybe misled or deluded or something like that.
Doesn't matter, right? If you misled us all off a cliff, that's not good. Doesn't really matter. I get hung up on the controlled opposition angle just because it fascinates me. A lot of times I don't find it to be what we all think it is. A lot of people kind of, again, it's either heroes or devils. We look at everyone like that instead of kind of like, well, what's the information? And then where is this group of personalities steering that information, and what are they justifying in its name, right? I mean, a lot of times the most profound truth can be hijacked and used in the wrong way, of course. But I totally agree with what you've written about this. I would like to get further into that. Like, let's talk about the global conference initiative that she's a part of. It's a science-based co-creative project to unite people in heart-focused love and intention to facilitate the shift in global consciousness from instability to discord to compassionate core, cooperation, and increasing peace. So we know they always use this kind of rhetoric, but let's get into that. I mean, this literally sounds like every hippie's wet dream. And I say that not in a mocking tongue. Like, I truly appreciate that from a psychedelic point of view, that this is where we all know we should be going. But can we talk more about how this language is twisted under this organization, these organizations?
So I believe we're referring to it's the Global Coherence Initiative, which is part of the HeartMath Institute.
Yes.
Yeah. And so she promoted that in 2 books. One of them is Birth 2012 and Beyond. And the other one is this one here, which is Awakening the Power of Our Social Potential, Conscious Evolution. I may have inverted the subtitle with the main title there, but you can see in the title here that this is sort of an offshoot of the idea of human potential movement, but rather social potential. And here's Birth 2012 and Beyond, just for people who want to just take a look at the artwork there. And basically in both of those, the idea of HeartMath is, as you mentioned, so in the Birth 2012, she puts it as part of this shift network, and also connected to something called the Birth 2012 campaign. And interestingly enough, in this book, she says that 2012, if everybody remembers, 2012 was going to come up with all these different theories about what's going to happen, right? Well, even in this book, though, she says that 2012 is the shift point, and we'll have 8 years to get ready for the real next level, which 8 years later is 2020, right? Which is COVID,
Boom.
and which is
Everything.
the new normal that she mentions in several other publications. Okay, one of those other publications is this 52 codes for conscious self evolution.
That's
right?
the one I'm familiar with. Yeah.
Yeah, and that little butterfly there, so you know, transforming. You know,
Some
but
listeners
the
are
idea-
already picking up on the symbolism.
So the idea of the HeartMath and the Global Coherence Initiative is this, that so the HeartMath Institute, which is connected to HeartMath Inc. So there's like a for-profit branch and there's like a nonprofit branch. Okay. And both of them traffic in the same products, which are these biofeedback wearables. And there's a whole industry of biofeedback wearables. You're probably maybe familiar with some of them,
Yes.
like the Fitbits, or like they've got meditation apps. They got some for prayers or to help you sleep. There's some that I talk about in my book that are for to measure the students, basically what they call their socio-emotional learning algorithm. So like, are they paying attention? And it measures stuff like, you know, do they enjoy the curriculum, things like that. But it measures stuff like heart rate, okay, galvanic skin response, could be EEGs, so like brain waves, okay. The HeartMath Institute, what they specialize in are these wearables that track your heart rates, okay. And, you know, sort of using it with like meditation techniques. And so, so two of the products are, one is called M-Wave and the other one is called Inner Balance. And they use sort of a multi-level marketing strategy to sell this stuff, if you know what that is, which that's something that's intimately tied with the human potential movement and a lot of these self-help guru type, you know, not occult, but cult organizations, basically, right?
Mhm.
And, you know, so like you can be a HeartMath coach or a HeartMath trainer. And so you go and you take this class, you get certified to sell these wearables and train other people how to use them. And you can train companies how to use them. There's actually applications for schools in there. So, you know, like if you want your employees to sort of everybody to kind of gel and, you know, get team building and all that type of stuff. There's little packages for the HeartMath coaching on that. So with the Global Coherence Initiative, which is what Hubbard promotes in the Birth 2012 book, is basically it's the same applications. You're gonna put this thing on, and then you're gonna go into this online sort of social media platform called the Global Care Room. And it's gonna like have a little globe on there, and it's gonna like light up little dots of light where people are, you know, meditating and with their app. And this app is sort of measuring your ECGs. And the idea is that everybody's going to synchronize their heart rates, and they're all going to focus their attention on something positive to help us all sort of cohere as a global community. And for her, this would help shift consciousness towards, you know, the new normal and this whole idea of conscious evolution. And, you know, and it hooks up to your smartphone through something that goes on your ear. And somebody had commented on my Telegram, and I was typing this up today, and I haven't had a chance to send it off yet because I actually did research. You know, so you know, if anybody has questions or comments, please engage me. I always engage back.
Good.
But the person said something like she had used it and didn't think there was anything weird about it. You know, it just helped her manage her stress and stuff like that. And, you know, yeah. I mean, I don't doubt that on an individualized basis it could do that. But what I'm looking at is this global coherence initiative that could sort of be used to sort of, you know, get everybody on board with some agenda or another. And so what I did was dug a little deeper and saw that, you know, back in, I want to say June 2nd of 2021, right when sort of lockdown stuff was sort of slowing down, they were like, you need to put your app on and go to the Global Care Room and meditate on patients, because even though we're getting close to you know, ending the lockdowns, we're not there yet. And so you need to be patient, and you know, you have to be responsible for each other in this global community. So quite literally, you know, there was a an event or an initiative through the Global Coherence Initiative with the Global Coherence app, where people were sitting around meditating on how they should be more patient and not, go out and party or, you know what I mean, jump out of their skin and because they've been locked down. In other words, comply with the new normal, the lockdown. So, I mean, I didn't include that part in my article. But lo and behold, that's exactly what they did. And I found something else that right now, the current global care initiative, so you put your app on, and what you're supposed to meditate on is the Ukraine war. Okay.
Oh, of course.
And so now the one thing I'll say about that is that it actually wanted you to meditate on both sides sort of coming to peace. So it wasn't like, picking a side or, but it's still got
there.
Everybody's, brainwaves focused on whatever is the news cycle and sort of to be in coordination with that, you know what I mean?
Right. And we know, I mean, my God, I mean, I haven't asked, and I don't, if you're comfortable talking about your own personal spiritual beliefs or not, but my God, like this is just, it's just such a ripoff of real spirituality, of course, because your spiritual teachings that are honest are trying to pull you away from all of that stuff to give you time away from anything, understanding the transitory aspect of the material world and all this good stuff that is true. It gets hijacked by these people. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's another angle where I sort of got some guff, which was from the sort of the Gnostic community. So I'm a classical Christian, and I'm not a Catholic or an Orthodox, and I'm not a Protestant, and I don't really have a church like that. But I'm not a Gnostic Christian, and I believe in Jesus is the Son of God, died for my sins. Is the Logos incarnate, all these things that you would, the traditional, not Gnostic Christianity believes, right? And a lot of Gnostics, because Barbara Marx Hubbard, she uses this term herself, right? She says something to the effect of, when we reach conscious evolution through technology, and she at one point even refers to the internet, and not just the internet, but like Facebook and social media platforms as our extended nervous system. And that through this nervous system, which HeartMath and the global coherence, you could tie that into it, through that extended nervous system, we will consciously evolve into, she says, quote, the Gnostic human. Okay. And so, and there's also, so H plus or Humanity Plus, which is the magazine for the World Transhumanist Association. There were several publications that I quoted from in the article where they conflate or tie together the idea of Gnostic spirituality with transhumanism, right? So sort of, if you think about the idea, like the theosophical branch of, sort of the Gnostic tributaries, this idea of becoming the ascended master, the language in many ways go together. With the Gnostics, a lot of Gnostics, their rebuttal was that, well, we don't believe that technology is how you get there. And
exactly.
That's sort of what you were saying, right?
That's exactly where I was going. It's a hijacking, because they're going, yeah, isn't that great that you're this being and we're all this thing? Yeah, and this is how we do it. It's like, whoa, you had me up until that point. And my wife actually said that, because we were talking, like I told you before, I was reading some of your article to her, and she's like, HeartMath, no. And she's thinking of all these different names. And, like I said before, in my humble opinion, it's like, I told her, babe, if you had a TV show right now and you wanted to express what you felt and what you thought was the truth to the people, what would you be saying? Would you be telling a lot of these spiritual things that you've learned through your own experiences that these other people seem to be saying in maybe better, more sexy language? Yes, I would, and that doesn't make you an agent, but it absolutely, it's such a hard line to find, honestly. And I'd like my listeners to hear this. If I haven't said it a billion times, my thing is, if they're telling you that you can do it yourself, it's probably the truth. And even if they're selling lessons, I would say if they're not selling any products, if you can do it with your own damn body and everything, that's at least something in the right direction. As soon as there's any attachment to the external world, then you're not talking about spirituality that tries to detach you from the external world. You know, it's kind of a mockery in itself. And those of us who've been sticking around for a long time in this community are like, okay, I see what they're doing. Oh, this is not going to be good because they're going to sweep up a lot of good thinkers with their agenda who see through a lot of the surface level stuff that the church has done for thousands of years, but also sees through this technocratic bullshit that's trying to hijack this old way. I'm not trying to ramble here, but just to throw in, if you're familiar with Terence McKenna or not, he, you know, we talked about 2012. He had his Time Wave Zero computer program that counted down to zero. And he thought that that's when the singularity was going to happen. And he couldn't figure out why. He made his calculations based on the I Ching somehow. Brilliant guy. Not sure if he was some connected dude or just coming up with this crazy shit on his own. But regardless, it's like, it's in the ether here. It's happening. Something is going on. And it is in a way biblical that this deceiver would be looking like the right way to go for a lot of people. And I think when the Bible's talking about people, you know, everybody's going to herd that way. And I think those of us who are left behind, who see through it, maybe it's not really about, you know, Gnostic or not Gnostic. Maybe it's those of us who kind of had this primal faith that were able to keep us away from going towards this fucking bullshit white light of theirs. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, not at all, man. I just, when you said that, I wanted to show that I leaned down, so I wanted to show this picture here. So this is another one of her books. This is basically her biography. This is The Hunger of Eve. Mm-hmm. And we have a picture of an apple here with a bite out of it, and what's inside of it. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's the universe. Right. And, you know, so the secrets of the universe, right? Knowledge, it's the tree of knowledge, right? Are inside the apple. And she basically goes through, you know, sort of the Gnostic, and I know that Gnostic is, you know, there's different branches. So, you know,
well, I'll just clarify, right? Just let me clarify that when they use they're lobbing on to something that's existed for thousands of years. And we love to always, those of us who love ancient history in the conspiracy world are always battling like they were all evil back then, or oh, they were Anunnaki demon reptilians. I don't know. I wonder if it's just bad personalities, you know what I mean? But yeah, anyway, I think Gnosticism itself is, again, it's being used in this way, even though it's all the same language. It's very easy to replace this human being with this external force, because we always are lazy. We're always giving away our work to something else. You know what I mean? All right, I will shut up now. Go ahead.
No, you're cool, man. I mean, just so the reason why I brought it up is because I think it's that thread of, you know, the Gnostic narratives that sort of lends itself to this idea of, you know, the transhumanist bent, which is that, right? So in that inversion of the Genesis story, right? You have basically, you know, the God of Abraham is the demiurge, is the bad one, and, you know, Lucifer is the light bearer, and, you know, he's the good one, and it's the tree of knowledge that gets the people out of the garden, which is the prison, right? And sort of, but, you know, it's sort of this pursuit of knowledge, right, at a certain level that lends itself to the idea of conscious evolution or technological evolution. And, you know, I remember just in academia, you know, it's long been the argument that evolution stopped happening biogenetically for human beings a long time ago, that basically it's our technologies that drives our evolution. In other words, and thereby it's our knowledge, right, our ability to manipulate our environment with our technologies that drives our evolution. This is the story of, you know, Space Odyssey 2001, right? So, you know, you've got the 8 people out there, and, you know, if you ever pay, and it's full of Masonic allegory. Oh, right? Yeah. So you've got that obelisk there, and then you've got that the moon above it, right? And well, what do you have? You have an angle, right? And you have a circle, or you have a, right, an angle and a curved line, meaning, right, you can graph that geometrically with a square and a compass, right? And the monkey looks up and he sees the curve of the moon, and he looks down and he sees the same curve in the bone, right? And so what he's doing is he's abstracting through knowledge. He's seeing, right, he's coming up with the abstract concept of a circle. In other words, the concept of abstract geometry, which enables him to grab that bone and now leverage it as a weapon, which is basically the first tool that enables, right? And it's sort of the Cain story as well, right? So he kills Cain, and then, he throws this thing up, and it goes up into the sky, and it turns into, the scene fades, and it's a space station. And so basically the symbol there is that, from that seed, that concept of geometry, right? You have basic understanding of how to use stone tools. You abstract it out mathematically, and, until you can sort of branch it out into higher forms of technology. And if you think about, the G inside the square and the compass, right? It means several things, and some of them are, right, geometry, God, gnosis. So there's, again, the Gnostic reference, and then generation. So if you put all of it together, sort of what it means is that, right, by mastering geometry, you can become your own God by achieving gnosis, and therefore you can then generate your own reality based on, right, the gnosis of your self-godhood, right? And so if you think about the transhumanists, right, somebody like, who is he right here? Mr. Harari, right? Homo Deus, right? Basically man to God, or God man, or human to God, or God human.
Yep.
And then you have other people like Ray Kurzweil has said, right, that these types of technologies will help us to become godlike. You've got Ben Goertzel, right? He uses he's the head of Hanson Robotics. His little AI bot's called Sophia, right? Which is right? Another, right?
The source, yeah.
And then you've got the Way of the Future Church of Artificial Intelligence, right? So I mean, like, there's a lot of sort of self-worship or aspirations to become, for the human to become his or her own God through, right, as I mentioned, right, through technology, through
absolutely
the gnosis of all that. And so, again, I know that, there's, clearly people that identify as, what I mean, Gnostic.
Well, that's why I wanted to extend a bridge, because I don't call myself a Gnostic by any means, because I think there's plenty of holes there. And also I think that's a story, like there's many, like, Gnosticism and what that story entails also exists in many other parts in the world, in different cultures too. It's these mystery schools that pop up everywhere. But I wanted to extend this bridge because I have the background that I do, and where it took me, and where my direct experiences with God, or how I call it God. I'm comfortable with that word, always have been, ever since these experiences, but I walk that fine line. And, this conversation is actually going in a better place, in my opinion, than it was originally going to stay on just her and her work. But I think it's really good that we're getting into more of the philosophy behind what's going on, because that's what has always baffled me. And I think it's hard for me to even write about and express to people sometimes. It's, again, there's a fine line here, because in my interpretation, this is just me, you find truth on both ends of this, where I've had my own experiences with God, and it was within, because that's how I accessed it. But then that same understanding led to an understanding that the difference between outside and inside is actually what the illusion is about. And, I mean, not to go off on too much of a tangent on, specific beliefs or anything like that, but I do find that it's the ego running the show in this group's case. I find that the whole point of going through these processes of meditation and all this talk that they've fucking ripped away from the real nitty gritty of spirituality is that you're trying to get to that place where the ego is silenced, and you become more like a giving person. You become more outwardly giving towards because it's like the golden rule, right? It's like the more love in the world, the more love is going to be reflected back on you, blah, blah, blah. It sounds cheesy. It's a Hallmark card. I'm sure it can be easily hijacked, but at the same time, it's also true. That's why it can be easily hijacked. And so when you have these experiences, you're supposed to let go of that egoic prowess that makes you think that you can become God. In my opinion, that's where some of this Gnostic stuff, whether its original intention was this or how it's being interpreted, is wrong, is that you become God. From the side that fears this, it's being interpreted that way. And from a lot of people that utilize these beliefs, it's being interpreted that way, which again is why these people, they are able so easily to, and like I said before, shit, this is going to sweep up a lot of good thinkers that are onto something, but they're missing the point. They think they're God. No, you were in communion with this force that is God. You were able to, I mean, I'm rambling again, but as above, so below is a principle that is often, kind of feared because of this, divide between, heathenism, paganism, occult ideas, and Christianity, which at one point were all one, and they broke. I mean, that's what we're learning about history and how we're in a family feud right now, and it's all our family. It's pretty fucked up. And some of us, that God's out there somewhere instead of in here with all of us.
Yeah, well, so as far as like, when you talk about the golden rule and like the moral law, like, in the classical Christian sense, right? Like there's a reason why, God is sovereign, and maybe, and if there's anything on earth that's close to that, it's Christ, right? But it puts a nice wall between you trying to become God or trying to achieve some sort of like a secret special knowledge or ascended mastery, or
I think it's both, man, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, my thing like this is like the moral law, the golden rule, doesn't really require you to be special or super, right? It actually requires you to be really humble and
Absolutely.
just like a normal, regular person, right?
And that's why Ram Dass had to have that documentary called Becoming Nobody, because this real spiritual movement is about letting go of that egoic self that indulges and puts themselves before others, which is literally what's happening in front of us, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, and with like you mentioned, as far as like the way these technologies sort of actually take you outside yourself instead of sort of being humble and sort of finding some sort of center. Another critique that somebody had was well, it's the TV mesmerizes you, this wearable helps me to sort of center myself, okay, but then it's like, to me, it's sort of like there's similar stuff in martial arts, and I didn't mention this, but 20 something years, right? I used to compete amateur and stuff like that, and a lot of people wear like heart rate monitors, like and I mean, maybe that helps, but ultimately, like, you should be able to kind of sense it yourself, right?
Yes.
And so I wonder whether or not even with the best intentions, some of the wearables and the tech stuff actually just sort of impedes the ability to do that, and the other thing, again, to go back to my what I was suggesting about the idea that the golden rule and the moral law and all that is it doesn't require you to necessarily be perfect, right? It just requires you to have grace and forgiveness.
Yes. And
it doesn't mean that therefore you don't always, like, you can be upset sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to like have your this sort of Zen thing all the time, right?
Yeah, they're denying all of it. They're denying that of people. They want people to be these fucking buzzed robots, right?
Yeah, and that's why like deep breathing meditation, and things like that, like to center yourself, totally cool with it, right? I mean, like when people start getting into like trying to like transcend or like reach this this sort of like higher state of consciousness, like you were talking about, sort of like, well, I don't know what the quote from Ramdas was, but it was something to the effect of sort of losing yourself, becoming nothing, or becoming
nobody. Yeah, he always said that you have to face the fact that you're nobody before that you can become somebody in this world. That's kind of his idea.
Is that like a moksha sort of nirvana, no-mindedness thing, or is it something else?
Probably, yeah. In a way, so like in the same sense that where the Gnostics would probably do this to you, right? Where you talked about Christ, where if anything's sovereign on this earth, it would be Christ. Where the Gnostics would probably say, and now we have quite a bit of archaeological science backing up these claims of psychedelic substances and everything in old places and everything, and it's old hat at this point. That Christos could possibly relate back to this. Unfortunately, I got to say Christ consciousness, which I think the terminology is really provocative and sexy, and that's why they've been using it for so many decades. But the concept of it again is like, yeah, this is hard to put in this context, because I understand where you're coming from now, and I accept where you're coming from, and I think it's valid where you're coming from. I think what Christianity is always talking about is this egoic self that needs to be batted down, and you need to be submissive to this Christ idea, that this much better idea. And I think Jesus is a great example, or is literally the example of what we were supposed to be like, right? Christ-like, right? And yes, I think this whole movement is filled with idolaters and people who are completely fucking up God's real message of who we are here. We are his children, not his equal. I don't think that at all. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong with that. And I know I'm kind of running in circles here. I apologize.
And this will bring us back to the article, because that's a term that she uses
all the time.
Christ consciousness, right? I mean, I don't think Christ consciousness, is calling half the population, right?
Well,
to the extent that it's a thing, right? Like, yeah, go ahead.
Well, just that, I'm big into etymology. If you go into some of my episodes, man, yeah, I go deep into words and the history of words and where they come from. And not only are we finding a lot of, benign nature in a lot of things we consider demonic, but also there's the element where Christos, eventually you find out this was anointed. And of course, one part of the world says, well, yeah, that anointed one was Jesus. And then other part of the world was like, that was Krishna. And another part of so it's, in a way, I've also heard, and this is kind of switching gears a little bit, but here, go ahead, respond to that first before I jump off. If you had something.
So it's so the New Agers would like sort of engage in something that's known as syncretism, right?
Yes.
And then in the Christian vein, sometimes it's sort of related to something called ecumenism, right? It's sort of this idea where you take the mythologies of any world religion and you sort of try to find where you're saying something similar and then call it the same thing. And, and by the way, before I was like, a classical Christian, like, I've got, I Ching tattoos.
Oh, so you've done your time. You've gone the distance.
I used to make birth charts, right? Like I used to cast the Yarrow stats. Like I've dabbled in mystical stuff,
Good. That gives me more perspective about you, and I appreciate that. I mean, I already did, but I'm glad this makes you even more cool. You've walked the walk. You get it.
No, yeah, and so and I don't believe that just like in the same idea that like we're using computers right now.
Right.
Some people might say that like
we're in it, man.
Right, like we're on our way to being transhuman, like. And, some people are like, well, that's sort of, an equivocation or a slippery slope or something like that. But not really, right? Like a friend of mine, we were having this debate, and there was this deep philosophical discussion on his podcast about deconstructionist philosophy and, what's the relationship between the words we use and the things we refer to. And we sort of came to the conclusion like, well, dude, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to a picture of you on a screen. Right. And so like, you know, our lives are already bound up. Now, does this mean that like every form of using technology is there, thus, you know, sort of transhuman? I mean, there's got to be a line somewhere, but I don't think it's fair to say that all technology is thus transhuman. And in the same way, you know, I don't think, you know, that, you know, every form of, you know, like I said, deep breathing meditation or you know, sort of like, you know, yoga and things like that is necessarily like, you know, sort of deep, you know, or dark mysticism or something like that, right? I don't go there, right? Interestingly, you know, sort of to tie together, you know, if you've ever studied the I Ching, you know that, right, there, the yin and yang is broken line, solid line. Yes. And then quite literally, Leibniz used broken line, solid line to come up with binary code 0 and 1. Yes. Right. So basically, right here, and in the I Ching, right, it's both a logical system in the sense that you can graph anything based on base 2 notation, but you can also divine with it, right? So you can cast your Yarrow stocks and you can get like an oracle, and you know, as you're meditating on something and get sort of like, you know, some perspective on whatever it is in your life. So it's yes, and you know, Gertzel, right? He uses an I Ching symbol for his Hanson Robotics is the logo. And it means something. I can't remember what it was. Rosa Quarry interpreted it, and I wish I could remember what it was, but it was like if you read it and thought about robots, like it somehow could be a double entendre, right? But anyways, I'm digressing, right? My point is that, you know, so I've studied, you know, all the different stuff, not all of it, but you know, pretty much everything that most people have encountered, I've dabbled in. But to get back to the idea of syncretism or ecumenism, like, yeah, you could say that stuff is similar and there's stuff that overlaps, but to be honest, there's ways that it doesn't fit together, right? And, you know, in my book, you know, my solution, you know, to the whole ed tech agenda is to go back to the classical method, and that means grammar, logic, rhetoric. It's the trivium method, which, you know, has always been used in, you know, classical Christianity, but not just that. I mean, even Freemasons were big on the trivium. But you know, when you look at logic, right, and you know, interestingly, the root logos is right. What First John is actually, or John 1 is, you know, they say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and Word with God. Right. If you read it in the Greek, it's in the beginning was the logos, and the logos was God, right. And so the Greeks had another word for like the grammatical symbol of word, right? Like before, this is one of the things that sort of got me to sort of convert all the way, which was like, you know, I used to hear that and it's like, in the beginning was the Bible. Like, well, that doesn't make any sense because like, you know, the Bible is itself sort of, you know, it's historically in pieces, right? There was an Old Testament and a New Testament, like, you know what I mean? Like we know that, but clearly the New Testament wasn't right when the Old Testament was. And so, you know, so what does that mean, right? And well, no, it doesn't mean word. It's, you know, the Greek for the grammatical symbol would be rima. So they picked logos because that's basically it's a very loaded term, which basically refers to ontology or like the order of the universe. Okay. And it's sort of in the East, it has a corollary with the Tao. And so you might see this book here that says Christ, the eternal Tao. And this is why I go by Taoist professor, because, you know, if you translate it into the Chinese, it was often, they would say in the beginning was the Tao, rather than picking, a Chinese script as a ideograph or whatever as the corollary, right? Because they had this concept like, oh, this is more like logos, right? And so, you know, and I'm a martial artist, so I that's my handle because, you know, I don't want, as I mentioned before, like, you know, I believe what I believe. Sure. And, you know, I want to be honest about that, but I don't want to fight with anybody that doesn't believe that. And I don't feel like I have to beat people over the head with it. And, you know, to go back to what I was getting at with the idea of logos and logic is that one of the laws is this thing called contradiction, right? And it's the one thing that we have that can, like, we can't know everything, right? I don't care what Barbara Marx Hubbard or whoever says, you can't become God and somehow be the mind of God as Google wants to be, right? You can't sort of download all the world's knowledge through some brain computer interface like Kurzweil would believe. But what you can know is where you're wrong, right? Like that's the one thing you can know is like when something is not measuring up. It doesn't mean you have all the answers, but right, you can at least say like, oh, I messed up there. Right. And this sort of gets us back to the idea of the whole golden rule thing, which is really just being able to be honest with yourself and say like either, hey, I don't really know that, or, you know, you raised a good point. I need to go back and check it again. Or, you know, hey, I that was wrong and I'm sorry. Like that, to me, that's the higher mind. Like that's it.
Damn
that's
right.
It, you know what I mean? Like,
yes, bare bones, man. Occam's razor, in my opinion, is still valid. You know, that's the most important thing here is that when it really comes down to it, it's the simplicity of that golden rule or that good behavior, that reaching out, that serving others, all that good stuff. You know, I think we've come perfectly right. You know, we've walked this bridge beautifully, I think, because it just brings it right back around. The Taoist professor, I love it because the way, man, like Taoism is so simple. There's a reason why it broke away from it. Well, not literally, but you know, it's a offshoot of these mainline religions over Buddhism or Hinduism or anything. It's its own thing that is stripped down to this, you know, being honest with yourself. Really, it really does come down to that, I think. And that's the opposite of what all of these people are bringing us towards. It's literally a mockery of being honest with ourselves. It's, again, you said, Kurzweil and all of them think that you can download the history of the world. No, you're not going to be doing that. You're going to be just interfacing with something that's showing you that information. And it's not going to be, it's not going to be you. It's just constantly going to be putting on superhero PJs. And that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, and I don't think that, you know, when they say like you'll be able to copy your consciousness and upload it, like
bullshit.
I don't think, like, this is what I think. Like, so, you know, you've heard these like cliched stories, and I don't know if they're true or not, but maybe they were. And that is, you know, so when we came, you know, when the Europeans came over to the Americas, you know, that when they encountered the Native Americans, they, you know, took a picture of them or something, and they'd show them the picture, and then the Native American would say something like, "Oh, you know, you captured my soul," right?
Right.
Because they see this clearly, like this is a picture of me in there, right? Like that's me in there, right? And like I think that all that this uploading consciousness thing would just be like it would be a 3D version of that maybe you could program it to say, like, respond to you, like through like sort of some sort of Alexa algorithm that maybe sounds like you and has sort of a bunch of like stock, you know, responses that would be something like you would say, you know, based on an aggregate of everything you've ever posted online or something. And it might convince you or whoever's talking to it that it is like, that's, you know, it looks like him, sounds like him. That's exactly the things he believed. That's exactly the things he said. But it's just a 3D picture. Like, it didn't steal your soul any more than the photograph did, right? Or your consciousness, to use their term. You know? Yeah, man. I just had a great thought here. Like, maybe the only way they would do it is if they could at least produce consciousness, then they could at least show those pictures enough, right? Like you're saying, like, convince you, because people can be manipulated so easily, as we can see. Can you imagine coming out of a vat and just being given a history? I mean, we see that in the movies all the time. And I like to say that they're kind of telling us what's going on half the time. So I don't know. Well, and that's the one thing, though, that, you know, whether it be Christ consciousness or just evolutionary consciousness, or this idea of consciousness in general, like, you know, we need to raise our consciousness. It's like, we haven't really defined what that is. So it's hard to say what raising it really looks like or means. Now, I mean, we could be referring to being aware of the propaganda and things in some ways, you know, on just sort of a, you know, awareness level. But like, when people talk consciousness, right, it usually means something more than, you know, your brains or your mind or your soul, spirit, whatever, your ability to sort of process information. It means something that's metaphysical, that's something like the consciousness with a big C, right? This thing that sort of like is not just, you know, neurotransmitters and electrical signals and chemicals in the brain. It means something something that's sort of metaphysical and transcendent, right? But I mean, even the term itself, consciousness, like if you look at the suffix on it, right? Ness it's a quality of something else.
Yes, I mean? Dude. Yes.
It's you know what I mean? Like it's like an adjective. It's not a noun.
Yes,
you know
dude. That's so awesome that you brought that up. Because honestly, shit, where was I going with that? So consciousness, yeah, it's describing something else. And a lot of so the reason I was really into Buddhism when I was younger, and I kind of saw that the split away from Hinduism, which, you know, Buddhism was because they even rejected the self. They were like, yeah, you talk about, you know, letting go of attachment to this world, yet you're holding on to this self. Yeah, we think that's illusory too. And it's like, it's kind of getting at what you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, this consciousness, what is it describing? It's just describing like maybe like more of a verb of conscious, of a state of being, perhaps, which I think a better way to put it might be, instead of raising our consciousness or expanding our consciousness, maybe it could be that we're reaching upwards or reaching outwards towards something, or reaching inwards. But it's level, like to be enlightened, I would say, is to be shot back down to earth more than anything else. That's what real enlightenment is. It's facing reality, past traumas, current traumas, things you're ignoring, because the conspirators in here too. I always say it. There's a little conspirator that's keeping you safe from all the things you don't want to think about, that you haven't faced in 10 years, all the bad habits you've created. It's all fractal. It's all, again, as above, so below, as below, so above. It's happening on every level. So I think using different language in certain ways, we are talking about the same exact righteousness and the same exact kind of evil archetypes, you know, in a way, even though we come from different backgrounds and different perspectives here. And I really thought this conversation was pretty great. I'm sorry I rambled a lot though.
No, man, I'm having fun, man. I watched some of your stuff before, and I could tell you're a genuine dude and an honest guy. I was kind of, you know, like, well, we're probably going to get into this metaphysical stuff, and it's not the most popular thing to say. You're a classical Christian, but, you know, there's this thing in the Paul says, you know, like, I will not be ashamed of Christ. And like, I don't want to say that I feel like I'm ever ashamed, but I do. Sometimes I feel like I should be more upfront about it. You know what I mean? Regardless, hey, yeah. I don't want to otherwise alienate people, because, you know, like you said, we're in this thing together, and, you know, I think we're both, you know, neither of us knows everything. We're both striving towards something true. Right. And in that regard, you know, I don't want to alienate people, but I want to be honest. And hopefully, you know, I know this society and this world is like, you know, with the cancel culture stuff, it's hard to have an honest, genuine conversation. But I thought that I would be able to do that with you. So that's why, you know, I'm sort of just, you know, winging it here. Like,
hell yeah. I'm glad you felt that way. And I appreciate that. And that's one of the great things that's come out of this conversation, this bridge that I keep mentioning, because I have that hard time all the time. I do a show called Worship in the Storm with a good friend of mine, Emmanuel, who is a follower of Jesus devoutly. And I'm not, but we do a great show together. And the way that our philosophies come together, it's beautiful. And I think we need more of that than less than that, because we're all fighting the same forces. We're all against the same ideas for our children coming at them. I think it's a collective that, you know, it's there's too much infighting, and I think that's inevitable. But hey, maybe more conversations like this can get the ball rolling to a higher state of consciousness. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, I mean, and, you know, that language works on a certain level. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and, you know, as you mentioned, you know, I mean, you know, and you know, Christians aren't very good at doing that either, right? You know,
no one is. Most of us are not. You know, most of us are letting the ego run the show. I mean, like, he's saying shit that disagrees with me, so therefore he must be on the other side of that line. You know what I mean?
One of my really good friends is he's a communist, right? You know, and he's like an open-minded dude. Like, you know,
there you go.
You know, he's like, you know, and he sort of, I don't know. I guess I'm I don't really do left-right stuff, but I guess for some reason, people on the right tend to have me on their show a lot more.
Dude, it's a racket. Left versus right is a racket. It's divide and conquer. You talk about Hegelian dialectic all the time. Yeah.
Maybe it's the Christian thing that makes it people sort of, but like we my friend Andy, What's Left podcast, like, he has honest questions about communism, and I have honest questions about my own economics, which are politically agnostic in a lot of ways. But a lot of people would just go, oh, this person identifies as communist, and on the other end he'd be like, oh, that guy's a Christian, and then we'd never talk. And the guy's like one of my best friends. And he's just like you. He's just an honest guy. He's a genuine guy. And what else can you ask for? And then as a Christian, speaking, on behalf, like, if it was just about everybody being perfect and getting everybody to believe the same thing, and even within the denominations, right? Agreed, right? Like, if that was the case, then you really wouldn't need Jesus, and you wouldn't need grace or forgiveness, right? So you're almost back to this level of like trying to be Jesus or be God, and like sort of beat people over the head with some sort of dogma. And I have a lot of questions myself, as far as, whether it be politics, economics, spirituality, and at the end of the day, I've got some of my best friends, pretty much all of them, right? Like all different kinds of beliefs. And I'm not going to not be friends with people anymore because of that.
Damn right. Amen to that, man. This conversation's been great. I really appreciate you coming on, dude. And I really appreciate your writing, your book, and this article. Please, everybody go check it out, because you can find it on your website and Unlimited Hangout. I'm sure other places as well, or it's probably all over the place by now, which is great.
People do that.
But yeah, please go and buy his book, School World Order. I highly recommend it, man. That book was great. And I think more people need to learn about, what's going on with their own children's education and everything, and where it's come from and where it's headed. Oh man. So anyway, let me stop here and let you tell my audience where they can find you. Where's the best place to reach you?
So I write pretty exclusively for Unlimited Hangout.
Cool.
And so, if you want to catch my most recent articles, that's where you would go first. And maybe I've got a website, which is schoolworldorder.info. See, I got a Twitter. So Taoist Professor Taoist, one or the other, I can't remember.
Sweet. I'll be retweeting our conversation and everything, and
I think I retweeted the announcement today. Yeah, and see, I got a Telegram. It's either School World Order or Taoist Professor, and there's a forum. One of them's the forum, or where people chat, and the other one's the page. I got a BitChute and a YouTube that you can get all the links to all these just at schoolworldorder.info. You can get my book from there as well, which is from Trying Day. So if getting it from Trying Day is better for me and Chris, and you don't want to feed Amazon if you don't have to, but it's on Amazon as well. It recently got translated into Japanese, which I thought was really cool. They reached out on their own. So cool. I was really happy about that. And then I got a database that's there where I upload all my stuff that Charlotte gave me. I've got boxes and boxes of all kind of files that.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the data. Man, that would be a whole series, but holy crap, man, like your database is impressive. And thanks to her for all of her contributions to this too.
Yeah. No, I was there for, what was it? Like, I said there was a 30-day period, and that's when I went through. She had 13 file cabinets in her barn with like 36 drawers all the way filled, right? And there's a lot of duplicate stuff, so I didn't just like grab it all out, but I went through like, and I've got literally, I'm not joking when I say I've got over 1,000 pounds of paper, and then if I add the books, I probably got close to 2,000 pounds of stuff. And the database, I upload it or update it every week. And if you want to support me, that database is on a paywall. It's the only thing that I put on a paywall. It's sort of, I'm trying to be able to free up time where I can publish and post more regularly. As an adjunct, I teach 6 classes instead of 3, like a tenured professor. So, I don't have a whole lot of spare time. So if I can, not trying to get rich, but if I can sort of teach less classes, I could do this a little more regularly. So I know people are hard up with the economy the way it is. So if you have extra $5 a month and you'd like to do that, you can go on there. It's a sort of a web brain. It's got all the nodes and threads, and it's got documents and notes.
Nice.
So that's pretty much everything. I think that's about it.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Please, everybody, go check out John's work. And again, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about this and having an awesome conversation where I didn't even know it was going to go to these depths. So I appreciate it. I appreciate that you could go to those depths with me, because a lot of people probably think I'm pretty weird, but not in this community, right?
No, not at all, man. I mean, like I said, I've had my own experiences, on the other end of the aisle, I guess you would say. And
hell yeah.
No, man. I'm glad we did it. We sort of went away from the article there, but I figured it would, because I seen how your style is. Just kind of
it's a conversation. Yeah, and I want people to read it themselves. I didn't want to go through every detail. I wanted to give a little bit of here and there and give everybody a picture of what this article is about. And I think it's a really important thing. To me, it's the penultimate, really, because spirituality is where they get our hearts. It's not about our wallet anymore, which obviously is very near and dear to us, and it's very important. But when they come after this stuff, this is where it gets real subtle and real dark, So I think this is very important. And again, I really appreciate all the work you're doing. So everybody, go check out John's work. And thanks again for tuning into another episode of The Deep Share. Take it easy. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Deep Share podcast. If you want to hear more, then hit that subscribe button. Follow me on all the social places. And remember, think for yourself, but don't always believe what you think. Till next time.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, that's hysteria. Enough, I get the point.
You have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone.
What do we know? What do we know? If I know what we know, then I can tell you what we know, and if someone else knows, okay?